the human brain from a 3D printer, it is still a vision, but experts assume that within a few years, individual parts or entire human organs can be created with the help of a 3D printer. In addition to medicine, aviation and aerospace in the car industry, but also plastic companies are also asking for the new technology. Every second car company plans for the future with parts from 3D printer.
3D printing opens new horizons for the companies. On one hand, it makes possible for the companies to design products with complex structures and thereby to win new customers. On the other hand, 3D printing can be considered as efficiency strategy and can be used for improving the existing operations. Furthermore, by applying 3D printing as production technology, new lean supply chains will be established.
Consultancy firm ENG in its 3D printing report 2016 estimates the future annual growth of the 3D printing industry to 25%. By 2020, this technology should achieve revenues of $12.1 billion.
The perfect point in the hype cycle for 3D printing. There was a bubble about 2 years ago and then a crash. And now prices are down, but they look as though they're starting to go up. And if the hype cycle pattern is followed, now that there's a more solid development of the industry, we could see a trend upwards over many years.
Yes, Giles, I mean, prices have come down, and that's very true, but I don't think this is enough. And frankly speaking, at this point, corporations have not undertaken the changes and the scope of the changes that are necessary to go into 3D. And that's probably why we still have a lot of overcapacity and underinvestment.
Who would have thought that the long-forgotten monsters of the 90s, 25 years later, would move the whole world, in the truest sense of the word? Several million players around the world went to the street to catch the virtual monsters. Pokemon Go, the most famous app of augmented reality, where the real world merges with the computer world, while virtual reality remains purely in the virtual world.
But I think virtual reality is much more exciting. There's huge potential in a number of industries, travel, leisure, all the sort of meet and greet facilities. You could have a virtual reality person that doesn't go on strike, doesn't have lunch breaks, and is completely reliable.
According to the International Data Corporation, IDC, worldwide revenues for the augmented reality and virtual reality market will grow from $5.2 billion in 2016 to more than $162 billion in 2020. This represents a compound annual growth rate of 181%. Conservative forecasts expect a rate of 60%.
I'm not convinced about virtual reality. I remember the discussions around cybersex in the 90s. In the end, it was just a fantasy and never became a big business. And furthermore, I see some discussions around adverse healthy effects. It could come out, for example, that the rays are negative or it's not good for the eyes, for example. So I'm careful.
So now we've heard some facts and figures about the Zeitgeists. And now it's time to ask the Werthstein Institute members to give their opinions about 3D printing and about virtual reality. But remember, please, the 30-second time limit.
Yeah, well, I'm still not convinced about 3D printing. I think it's much too early and the market is not ready. On the other hand, as you know, I like virtual reality. I think this is going to be the big hit, and it implies and involves a lot of other entertainment and game companies. So I think this is going to be the hype. We'll see with the Christmas season coming up.
Well, I just read this article about virtual reality. It makes your stomach turn. That's true for a lot of users. And not just that, but it's still a young technology. Whereas 3D is much more mature, big companies like Siemens really moving into it. I think 3D is the future.
Totally agree, Giles. Look again on the chart. I remember when a friend of mine in 2014, an architect, came to me and said so he will buy all these 3D printer stocks now. I had never heard something about that, but I had been skeptical because he is not an expert for equities, and it's not surprising me that he recommended that exactly on the peak and on the all-time high of the prices. But now the prices come down a lot. It's a good business, could be interesting, but it's a young industry. I think it's important to buy a broad range of companies to be sure so you have some winners there and not just loser in your basket.
There's a lot to be said for 3D printing, I agree, but I think there's cost savings in the virtual reality that make it much more attractive to me. One of the positives is that, you know, in say the meet and greet side of business, virtual reality doesn't go on strike, doesn't have vacations, doesn't get sick. So to me that's very positive, and I think that's the way I'm swinging, but it's a hard decision for me.
So now please, may I have your votes, 3D or virtual reality?
After my statements, very easy to imagine what my vote is. I prefer the 3D printer.
Well, I think I've heard the arguments, but on balance, I'm going to go with virtual reality today.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick to my opinion. I like virtual reality. I may buy one of those glasses, so here I am.
And now my vote is for 3D. So that makes 2 votes for 3D and it makes 2 for virtual reality. But as chairman, my casting vote takes us so that 3D wins, and that is now our new Zeitgeist, and you can invest in that.